The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to Run Toward the Roar, How Exceptional Leaders Build the Courage to Win in Challenging Times, sponsored by Murphy Leadership and hosted by WebAttract, your end-to-end solution provider for informational webinars. My name is Lori Dearman, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. For those of you not familiar with Murphy Leadership, they're a consulting organization that provides research-driven leadership development, coaching, and organizational change consultation. They're committed to providing leaders with insights that they can translate into best practice with confidence and courage. Today, Dr. Murphy, who I'll introduce in just a few moments, will share with us the research behind the Run Toward the Roar program and how businesses large and small have had breakthrough results across their organizations upon implementing it. You'll leave today with plenty to think about in terms of where your organization is along the process of being Run Toward the Roar ready and how you can take next steps in the readiness process. And just to give you an idea of who's sitting in the virtual chair next to you, here's a snapshot of who else is registered for today's event. Final tabulation shows a global audience of 650 professionals from 49 states and provinces from around the world. We have a very diverse audience with many leaders, coaches, consultants, and learning professionals from many industries, including healthcare, insurance, financial services, government, and biotech, to name a few. Now, regardless of your industry or role, we're confident that you'll find this webinar of value. And we've invited you, along with your peers who want to learn how to build courage and be successful in today's tough economy. Today is about learning through the review of comprehensive research conducted over the span of 3 years, including 982 organizations that's been translated into a 4-step action plan. We'll see concrete examples of how companies such as Kaiser, World Class Shipping, and Ontario Ministry of Health have stripped down outdated leadership models and have implemented a 4-step Roar response action process. And naturally, we hope will stimulate your interest to contact Murphy Leadership and learn more about Run Toward the Roar. And we'll give you more information on how to do that at the end of today's session. And now to get started, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Emmett Murphy, co-founder and chair of Murphy Leadership and author of the New York Times bestseller, Leadership IQ, as well as the upcoming Run Toward the Roar, Building the Courage to Win. Dr. Murphy's 16 books, articles, and research reports have been translated into 10 languages and distributed worldwide. He holds a PhD in organizational psychology from the State University of New York and has served as consultant and faculty for IBM, Johns Hopkins, Harvard Medical School, Brigham Hospital, the State University of New York, Beckert Associates of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, among others. Dr. Murphy, or Emmett, if I may, welcome to the webinar. How are you today?
Oh, doing well, Lori. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And before we get started, what do you hope folks will get out of today?
Well, I hope our colleagues gain insight into how courage can be the foundation for leadership in today's economy and how courage can be developed from the front lines right to the top.
And what do you want them to walk away with and do next?
Well, I hope everybody walks away with the ability to explain what leadership courage is, its power to drive positive change, and how it can be developed, because courage is grown, it's built from the bottom up.
Well, I, for one, am very excited to hear about Run Toward the Roar and what you're sharing with us today. So just to kick things off with gusto, I think the title really begs the question, why Run Toward the Roar? I mean, it does seem counterintuitive, no?
Yeah, it sure does. And some may even say crazy. Yeah.
Well, before you reveal why we should run toward the roar, let's see what our audience thinks. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. And we'd like to hear from you. Why would you want to run toward the roar? Go ahead and weigh in on that, and let's take a look at those results. Now, I'm showing about 10% for the glory, 34 I'm curious, and 52 to survive. So now that we've heard from the audience, Emmett, can you share with us why anybody would actually want to run toward the roar?
Well, I want to say to the curious folks, I'm with you. It can be dangerous, though, unfortunately, just to be curious. But anyhow, that's great fun. The 50% folks had it right. You run toward the roar to survive. That's what warriors are taught on the plains of Africa's Serengeti. You see, when lions hunt, the oldest and often the most toothless male lion sneaks his way to the head of a herd of game, and then while the rest of the pride of lions goes to the other end of the herd, while they get ready, and on some secret signal, the old male stands up and roars, whereupon the herd panics, runs away from the roar, and right into the trap set by the rest of the lions. So from the most ancient times, warriors have been taught that the safest way to deal with the lion's roar is to run directly toward it, where the opportunity for survival and success are much greater, the options are much greater. And usually that roar is really pretty toothless, but it can scare the heck out of us.
So what appears to an uninformed observer as a daring or crazy act to run toward the roar is actually a very carefully learned strategy for survival.
Yeah, exactly. And the term learned, Lori, is absolutely key. Survival on the Serengeti depends on learned courage. And as we found in our study, whether it's courage on the Serengeti or courage in leadership in today's organizations, courage in Afghanistan, true courage is learned behavior. It results from a very conscious decision to change the odds of survival.
Truly fascinating. Now, Emmett, I know later in the program you're going to help us tie this run toward the roar mentality into our daily work, but maybe we should start with the research that led to these insights in the first place.
That's always the great place to start. Sure, Lori.
So, Emmett, can you briefly explain why you undertook the study?
Yeah, it's very, very simple why we initiated this, because we were asked embarrassing questions by our clients. We didn't have answers to the questions. And by 2007, it was clear that we were truly in a once-in-a-100 years economic mess. It was clear that this wasn't simply a recession where we merely waited for a rebound. It was clear that a major transformation was underway. Very simply, the question was, how do you handle such an extraordinary situation? And quite honestly, none of us in our professional careers at that point had seen anything quite like this. I mean, I'm an older guy, so I've seen a bunch of stuff, but nothing like this. This is of our parents' and grandparents' generation. The answer, of course, was to find those who had already figured out the answer and were already putting it into practice. In other words, when you've got a question you can't answer, find somebody who does have the answer.
I see. And how did you do that? I mean, who was involved in the study and how did you carry it out?
Well, to find the leaders who were figuring things out and turning things around, we called together our team of research colleagues from the State University of New York, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Alliant University, and others, and began the process of surveying, interviewing, sampling, which is always a rigorous process, and directly observing leaders from over 982 business, healthcare, public service, and governmental organizations. And these are from the mainstream of economic life. I mean, we're all fascinated with Facebook, and it is becoming mainstream, but we wanted to see the people who turn on the lights in our society every day, what was going on with them. And from these organizations, we got a good picture of the profound change occurring in our economy. Fortunately, because of our prior research for such books as Leadership IQ, Talent IQ, and other projects that we work on, we had most of these folks in place.
And what did you learn? Can you share with us some of the biggest takeaways?
Yeah, I think the thing that was most encouraging for us, like any great research, if it's done properly and it's good research, the findings are clear and pop right up. We found two major things. First, that courage defines great leadership. It is the highest level of personal responsibility and corporate responsibility. It's the key to survival and significant change. And to find the answers to serious challenges takes courage. And second, we found that courage is a learned response. We speak of learned courage. one that emerges from a distinctive 4-step process of development that builds specific insights and skills. And they go together. You learn a little, you practice a little, and your courage builds.
So, Emmett, let's examine each of these findings. First, what did you discover about courage?
Well, the first thing, as I said, is the highest form of responsibility. And it is a convergence of 4 major elements, and the first of which is hope, what Martin Seligman calls learned optimism. It is the first key to survival and results from a strong belief that you can take control of your future and that the people around you will do positive things to support you and each other. And hope, therefore, comes from direct engagement with others. Hope is the first element. The second element, risk awareness. You've got to know what's going on, an understanding of what's happening, and the ability to diagnose what it means. So it isn't just a matter of, hearing it, as we say, hearing the roar, you better know what that roar means. The third is the skill to adapt, which is the mastery of skills that give you specific ability to deal with the challenges you're likely to face. Think of soldiers who are facing certain specific challenges. They're trained for those challenges, or how to watch out for the IEDs. You'll find that also with emergency physicians and trauma care people and so forth. And we're finding with leaders that they're recognizing this is a skill they must master. So risk awareness. And finally, and most importantly, is ownership. It's the commitment to take personal responsibility. I own the responsibility to change. Those are the 4 elements, Lori.
Well, so Emmett, that brings me to the question, do all of these elements have to be in place to achieve courageous action?
Yes. There's no easy way out. If you're looking for a great act of courage, if we're looking for something Gandhi-like or Martin Luther King-like or Mother Teresa-like, Christ-like, we are looking for that kind of behavior. But courage doesn't always just have to be that. Great acts of courage do occur when all these elements are present to a high degree. But we don't always need these great acts of courage to make progress. Even small steps can make a huge difference in things like profitability, customer loyalty, in clinical world, in the healthcare world, and actually in mortality and morbidity. Interestingly, in moderately healthy individuals and organizations, there's usually a fairly high presence of 2 or more of these elements, but they have not been fleshed out or brought together, often by putting the missing elements in place from the run toward the roar process. Significant steps towards real courage take place, and those steps are often all it takes to get an organization or individual moving in the right direction, a direction that ultimately leads to courageous behavior.
Well, that leads us to the second finding, the 4-step process that develops and builds courage. Let's take a look at those 4 steps right now.
Sure.
Okay, so we have the 4 steps on the screen here. Step 1 being hear the roar. Step 2, face the roar. Step 3, own the roar. And step 4, run toward the roar. So we're now getting into the business application of the metaphor, run toward the roar. So let's dive into the first step, shall we? Okay, so step 1, hear the roar. What does hear the roar mean, and what are the objectives of this step?
Well, to hear the roar is to assess the risks and opportunities impacting your specific situation. Now, this requires us to identify and diagnose what's going on. On the Serengeti, it means identifying the source, direction, intensity, and proximity of the roar. You need to know how much time you've got before you're going to be lunch for the lion. And while the process is pretty much the same thing in business and professional life, we've learned the signals are far more complicated. Actually, the jungle of our business life is more treacherous than the jungle on the Serengeti or on the plains of the Serengeti. There are many different types of roar signals being sent to leaders at any one time, which makes diagnosis and risk, as well as opportunity, much more challenging.
Can you give us a real-world example where a company was able to identify an emerging challenge, measure its intensity, and match it to the strengths and opportunities within the organization?
Oh, sure. A great example is one of our favorite clients, World Class Shipping. They're located near Kennedy Airport, winner of two major U.S. government citations for excellence in international commerce. Now, they heard the roar in very real terms through the frontline roar readiness assessment process that we helped them put in place, a formal process of listening to things. It enabled their customer service reps in Beijing to directly report a change in the morale of key Chinese suppliers. Now, these reps warned that a shift in policy was therefore going to take place. World Class had put in place this assessment process, as I say, and it involved most everyone in the company, so that it went through the different departments, and as people heard the news, they quickly reported the results that they were anticipating because of these changes directly to Bill Shaw, the chair and CEO. That enabled him within just a couple of days to arrange a trip to China where he stabilized relationships with key Chinese clients before the bottom began to fall out. And this is again in 2007 and 2008, and it was quite a dramatic sudden change. And that did happen and caught the other competitors flat-footed. So this assessment type of process, it can be utterly vital to the survival of a company.
So World Class Shipping essentially involved associates from the front lines all the way on up in the risk assessment process.
Yeah, yes, you're a good point to raise, Lori. Most companies don't recognize the listening power of their frontline people. I know we talk about this all the time, but talk is cheap in this case. We've got these intelligence gatherers, and we know from all the studies in the world that information flows from the bottom up, not the top down. Knowledge, the first levels of knowledge come in at the bottom of society, like in the bottom of companies. And when you don't listen there, you've got yourself in a situations that's not favorable. Your response is too slow when you're not really listening with enough depth. And therefore, you don't hear the danger, you don't recognize the opportunity, and that's the bad news. But the good news is that organizations that do involve people in what we call hearing the roar not only get more information more quickly, they also get it from people who are genuinely committed to the welfare of the organization, who own the roar. This diagnostic step is vital. I can't emphasize it enough. Our top leaders know that you dare not move without an effective diagnosis. That's why one of the major tools to come out of the study is this roar readiness assessment. It identifies the most vital issues and factors going on in an organization and key to their survival. At a minimum, and as a good starting point, leaders themselves should go through a roar readiness assessment to make sure they've fully identified the risks and opportunities facing them, and at least get a handle on what they could be.
Emmett, what does this type of roar readiness assessment look like? Can you walk us through this chart and pull out some of the key takeaways?
Oh, yes. This is an overview of the roar readiness assessment in this circular diagram here. The study produced very clear insight as to what leaders need to know to hear the roar. For those who are into things like the balanced scorecard and so forth, this real-world model is driven by advanced concepts of self-organizing systems. Enough, I won't go on with the jargon, but it's a fascinating thing for those who are into that kind of stuff. Most importantly, however, it provides a leader with a living CAT scan of the overall health of an organization. This overall body scan is broken out into 4 major functional areas, like anatomy and physiology types of things, and 12 subscales that drive specific action. The 4 functional areas are alignment, the ability to align its resources, including work and money. This provides, for example, vital info on where work redesign and restructuring might be required to improve productivity and quality. Alignment is the single greatest driver of quality issues. The second function is its ability to focus its energies on its key mission and goals and customer. Often the feedback on problems that are more basic come from a loss of focus that is driven by underlying issues of alignment. The third is the ability to adapt to change. This is something we simply haven't been paying enough attention to, is formally adapting, and it shows in organizations. And the fourth is the organization's ability to connect and engage its stakeholders, those who hold the power and the key to the organization's survival. That's obviously very critical. We're not connected. We're really not alive as an organization. The ROAR Readiness Assessment examines performance from a balanced, multidimensional perspective, providing evidence of what's happening now and what is likely to happen.
Emmett, can you give us a sample of how this might work right here and right now in the way of perhaps a mini assessment?
Oh, yes. Like you've requested, Lori, I selected a few connector items for a mini assessment. Those are always juicy, to get discussion going.
Perfect.
Here we are.
Okay, so folks, let's go ahead and take a mini ROAR readiness assessment looking at some connection issues. Now, to take the assessment, you'll want to locate something to write with and something to write on. And once you have that, go ahead and number your paper 1 to 5. Kind of takes you back to elementary school spelling tests. Now, what I'd like you to do is read each of the prompts on the screen and score your organization on a scale from 0 to 5, with 0 meaning not characteristic and 5 meaning very characteristic. Now, of course, you can use any of the numbers in between as appropriate. And we'll start with number 1. Associates across all levels are involved in assessing risk and opportunity. So jot down your rating for that one. Number 2, high-level performers are deeply engaged in change. So go ahead and record number 2. For number 3, when the organization is under stress, individuals regularly step forward to take on new responsibilities. Number 4, when change hits, leaders spend 60% or more of their time directly in the front lines. And then lastly, individuals feel safe taking vital information directly to a C-level leader. Okay, once you have a ranking for each of these items, let's have you go ahead and add up all 5 scores and divide by 5 to get your average. So again, we're going to add up the 5 scores and divide by 4 to arrive at your average score. Okay? And once you have that score, I'm going to go ahead and put up a poll for us, and we're going to gather where everyone is at. So go ahead and let us know where you came out on the assessment. Where is your organization on the ROAR readiness scale? Okay, and so your choices there are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And again, we're looking for your average score. All right, so what we're seeing there is about 4% weighing in at a 1, 23% of us at a 2, the majority at a 3, and just a few there at a 4 and a 5. Emmett, can you help us interpret our scores?
Sure. Now, 4 to 5, of course, means that you've really got some very good connection, and that would suggest a very high level of important information flowing, and that those at the top are getting the information they need to really respond to a crisis, to opportunities, to any kind of threats. Obviously, 4 to 5, not bad. If you're 3 or below, obviously, we're really talking in this time and age, just being average or being 3 isn't really good enough. You might be able to hang on, but you're really sort of operating blindly. And I think it's because we don't understand completely what it takes, what information it takes to really be aware of the risks. It's much more dangerous than the Serengeti. So obviously, I think we all know what those 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rankings imply. And I would say in the past, we might have said if you're a 3 or something, you're okay. And 2 and 1, you start really paying attention. Today, I would counsel that anything 3 or below suggests a fairly strong need.
Okay, and Emmett, you have this in a worksheet version that we can send out to everyone as one of our webinar follow-ups, right?
Oh yes, Lori. We're going to put this together, and I'll put some better definitions and a bit more information. So, at least it beats. Sometimes it beats gossip around the table. You might be able to use this to have a little fun.
Great. Okay, so now on to step 2. What are the objectives of step 2, face the ROAR?
Well, In Face the Roar, it's vital that a leader formally pause and translate the assessment into possible solutions, to survey what's available and might make sense before actually taking off on the run toward the roar. One key differentiator in the study between superior and average leaders was that top leaders collected their thoughts, examined their options before taking action on the assessment and results. They would not be rushed. If you ever see ever experience a military action close up, you'll see those who are most cool remain. It's fascinating. It's almost imperceptible, but in a couple of seconds, they are able to pause, process, and think what's happening. Watching a cardiac surgeon at work, when they, in the midst of a crisis, in a case, they will pause and just be able to collect their cool and know that they don't want to get this wrong. And great leaders do that. And they don't run off half-cocked. They look at options. We were very fortunate to capture these options in what we call the Roar Options Matrix. And great leaders do. They keep handy from their own learning the various options that may have come down from history, that may have come down from research. Now, in this particular case, these are handy so that when you see certain results from the Roar Readiness Assessment, you can say, this is what it could likely mean, and then you can adopt that or adapt that Roar solution to your situation. And this translates results into positive action very quickly, much more quickly than if you rush off a vital step, Lori.
And I'd say this moves us directly into step 3, to own the roar, right?
Exactly. When you've got a solution in hand, you can then move on to what is the very heart of the Run Toward the Roar 4-step process. Nothing works without personal ownership and responsibility, and that's the essence of courage. This is the very heart of everything we're trying to do, and it led to the development of a Roar ownership development script. Something very simple on the one hand, but very, very powerful. It comes down with a lot of lineage. Very important specific script by which you then look another person in the eyes and you work through, do you own this? And successful leaders in the study use this with great effectiveness, and they seem to come at it from so many different ways. Those who were really exceptional leaders, some were very learned, some in the school book way, and then got the experience afterwards. But most came from the bottom up, learned their way, and intuitively, instinctively, and then with some polishing, figured out this script. And they all sort of came to the same point, that without this ownership, nothing works. We picked up some very troubling signs, however, in the study from less effective leaders. And those signals were that they were substituting tough-minded accountability for personal ownership. We're starting to see a toughness and a nastiness starting to come back into management. And we'll be reporting this on a special paper. But here's the bottom line. With the power of technology today, the way we manage a lot of stuff through software, which provides non-negotiable demands on performance, and with increasing external oversight, the high levels of anxiety and free-floating anger in our society today, it's very easy to think that being a tough guy and that tough guy accountability is the way to get good results. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Individual ownership and personally developed responsibility is the key to success, especially in a market-driven economy. Now, take Bob Snyder's hospital in the Orlando, Florida healthcare system. As a new CEO, Bob made it his purpose to develop individual ownership from the ground up, unit by unit. We'd watch him work and journey of hearing, of facing and owning, be taken very seriously. And he'd personally be in the front lines. In less than a year, he just turned this struggling organization around into a thriving one. And he's the kind of leader who lives and breathes the concept of ownership. And one of the key results of the research was the development and refinement of this process. And we really encourage every leader to renew and master their skills in developing ownership.
Well, I think we all intuitively know that personal ownership is vital, but Your explanation really makes it clear why it must be recognized in a very rational and public way. And why don't we see what our audience's experience is with this? So what I'd like to do in the way of a quick straw poll is see where ownership is in your organization. So if I can ask everyone to place your mouse over the hand icon on the GoToWebinar panel, and I'd like you to raise your hand, please, if you believe 60% or more of the associates in your organization own personal responsibility for the survival of their organization. And I see hands raising quickly, and at this point I see about, 23%. So Emmett, any comments on the results?
Yeah, Lori. 60% is an important percentage. It's better to have a higher percentage no matter what. But here's the thing. This is a measure of the extent to which individuals in the organization are invested in that organization and see it as an extension of their personal concern for survival. We see the 60% figure in the highest performing organizations in our study. And I would say historically that has been a characteristic, but it was a most telling one this time around. It's usually the result of the most highly and effective people, the most committed people, serving as a magnet for optimism and courage. We usually have a cornerstone of 15, 20% of truly exceptional contributors in an organization. When they're really tuned in, they attract support. They communicate that this organization is a key for everyone's survival, and they influence 3 to 4 others. And that magnetism, that attraction builds momentum and usually accumulates that 60%, or as we say, the top 3 standard deviation and half of the -1 standard deviation. This attraction, this magnetism of hope, of belief, is key to an organization's survival. And it comes from inclusion in this 4-step process. So the closer you get to this figure, the better. What it really indicates is whether that 15 or 20% of the top performers see that as their responsibility to act as a magnet of positive thinking and belief in the organization. What we're seeing here obviously suggests that there's room for some development.
Okay, and I take that as a great segue to moving to step 4, run toward the roar. So can you walk us, or maybe I should say run us through step 4?
Yes, I know, Lori, that you're urging me to move on to time here. I get carried away. The most successful leaders in our study didn't stop with ownership, but actually made sure that the energy unleashed by ownership, I mean, when you own, now we're agreed, we're going to do it. And so they make sure that energy, however, is adapted and shaped to fit the specific demands of the run in real time. They follow through. For many of us who've been used to thinking of management tools like selection, conflict resolution, negotiation, as sort of static pillars of management, this study was a revelation. The most successful leaders in this study had streamlined these traditional tools down to their essentials, so they could use them in rapid response fashion when they're really out in the front lines. I mean, they don't always have to set up an extensive and formal bureaucratic meeting on a conflict issue or other issues. So they created a streamlined version. They knew very well they had to do these things, and they took the red tape out of leadership. These high-performing leaders have created what we call a run management toolkit that provides leaders with what they really need to manage change as it is being implemented. I often think of nurses on the floor who would really not, a nurse manager would not think probably that she would want to take someone off that floor and take the 15 minutes or 20 minutes and do something right there. And not always is that appropriate. But where it is, when you have the proper tools, you can do it. The same with somebody in a research lab, in a setting where things are moving quickly, and it doesn't always suggest it, but there's a need for it and a window of time to do so. If you have the tools, you can make use of that time. The successful leaders in this study set a new standard for tenacity and thoroughness and efficiency. They had no time or people to waste, so they dealt with the problems right where they found them, and they did that through this run management toolkit. They left as little to chance as possible, and they were just extraordinarily successful by actually having the tools to manage the run itself.
Now that's a compelling conclusion to our four-step overview, and also a timely setup for meeting Dr. Jim Turner, who is going to walk us through a living case study application of the four-step process. So I'd like to now invite Dr. Turner to the virtual podium. Dr. James Turner has worked with leaders in a wide variety of industries in both difficult human resources situations and in restructuring. Dr. Turner has co-authored 2 books, the most recent being Threat Assessment, a Risk Management Approach. He's held the post of Mental Health Service Director, Executive Director of the Clark Center, an adult and adolescent in- and outpatient treatment center. Dr. Turner has served as a consultant to the Joint Counterintelligence Training Academy, the Department of Homeland Security, Microsoft, Seagate Technologies, Morgan Stanley, and individual police departments, to name a few. He holds a PhD in clinical psychology. Dr. Turner, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to join you today.
And Jim, before we get started, can you share with us what you hope folks will get out of your living case study?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. I hope our audience gets a sense of how Run to the Roar process can really change individual lives, as well as the organization for the better, and how it does it with a high level of credibility and staying power.
And what were the issues you were facing?
Well, in this case, the challenge was to help physicians increase their productivity and personal satisfaction. In healthcare, and especially great healthcare organizations, you continue to face these issues of major computerized documentation and other kinds of changes to operations. And the number of physicians who were able to see that they had dropped the patients. They couldn't see as many patients, and this is concerning for them. And this was threatening their morale, and it was also affects how the bottom line functions. And so Emmett had begun a project, and as a certified Run Towards the Roar peer consultant, he asked me to join him and guide the project.
And so how did you apply Run Toward the Roar approach to this particular challenge?
We follow the discipline of the four-step process to the letter. And you have to have faith. The process works, and it worked. First, we conducted a Roar readiness assessment with physicians and other staff, and it identified several key factors that we didn't anticipate. We found that the physicians themselves are spending more than 55% of their time doing documentation. They also reported what they considered serious isolation from the programming staff who were developing new documentation, and isolation from the nursing staff with whom were developing a process for patient assessment and documentation. These were very telling findings, and there were others. But suffice to say, the readiness assessment put the roar of misalignment right on the table.
And what did you do with these results?
Well, we then followed step 2 and faced the roar. That is, we matched up the assessment results with possible diagnostic solutions. Several physicians commented that this was just like the clinical process. So they were very tightly tuned into what we were doing. We also invited nursing staff and programming staff to join us at this point, with the physicians in the ready, and examined possible solutions. So the most compelling solutions were to realign the physician's work so they could see patients rather than doing paperwork. While we were ready to take this slow and easy, all the parties saw the results of the assessment and jumped in to propose solutions.
So it sounds to me like they moved right into the ownership phase of step 3.
Hey, as you know, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? It wasn't quite that easy, but we did get there more quickly than we thought we would. I had to call a timeout and say, after we faced these roar situations and sessions, I wanted to call this timeout just to give everyone a chance to process the diagnosis and the solutions a bit more. Then when we reconvened, I used the ownership development script and small teams of about 6 to 8 physicians, nurses, and IT folks to clarify and lock down who owned what and who would personally accept responsibility to do what within what time frames. One psychiatrist said during these sessions that he felt like he was going through rigorous cognitive therapy. And I responded, yes, you are. He chuckled and he participated fully. He really understood the process.
Well, it sounds like this was a lively and engaging process.
Oh, always. When you have bright and talented people, it's all of that. In fact, it's very rewarding for all of us. We spent a couple of sessions on this ownership issue to make sure, because these are about the smartest people you can get, and they've got solutions that we need to get out of them. But we all participated with good humor, and they acknowledged that this was important, too, to keeping everything in perspective.
And where are you now, Jim? Are you getting good results?
Well, right now we're implementing step 4 and running towards the roar. Productivity is up, and morale is up, some 50, some 80. We've had a couple of good conflict and selection issues, and we've used scripts from Run Management Toolkit with great success to address these very specific kinds of problems. I think we're all pleased with where we're going.
So we've talked about the issues, the application of the Run Toward the Roar at Kaiser Permanente, but can you share with the audience any aha moments or lessons learned?
Yeah, I always have these aha moments, and this one was very quickly. I found out that I was able to step in and put the process to work. The tools worked. The system is so straightforward and carefully thought out that I was able to step right in there as a certified consultant and use the tools. The second aha is that when risk is shared, especially through a shared assessment, solutions and ownerships will follow. One surgeon said he felt like he was one of his patients going through an assessment and workup. And once he saw the results for his test, in which he was the subject, he knew he needed to pay attention.
I see. Well, Jim, thank you very much. And that was really a very timely example of how Run Toward the Roar works, particularly given the challenges in healthcare today. And now don't go too far, as we'll be calling you back during the Ask the Experts section in just a few minutes. But before we do, let's have Dr. Murphy back for a quick review. Emmett, would you like to offer any summary comments before we inform folks about the certification course and invite questions?
Sure, and thanks, Jim. Well, Lori, as this summary slide notes, Run Toward the Roar is a research-driven leadership solution that comes from real leaders facing real problems today. I think it's a new and timely solution because it comes from the problem we're living through. It's not something that we've recast or reshaped. It's very current and very pertinent and relevant to what I think all of us are facing. I think the other thing is that it emphasizes individual dignity, intelligence, and ownership. It's driven by the most important characteristic in life, courage. And I think, frankly, we were just taken aback and in a very, very wonderful way by the fact that that's what it does take, and that people are much more capable of stepping forward and taking responsibility than we ever give them credit for. Ownership builds courage, and it has led to the development of a wonderful set of tools that I think we can all share and benefit from.
Well, thank you, Emmett, for the summary. And I would like to take a moment to tell everyone that Run Toward the Roar is available to you today. Dr. Murphy and his team personally invite you to contact them to discuss how they can be of service. However, we want to especially bring your attention to the Run Toward the Roar webinar certification series for leaders, trainers, coaches, and consultants. And as Dr. Jim Turner reported, the certification is a valuable addition to any leadership professional's toolbox. And you can get more information at the Murphy Leadership website, and we'll be sharing more information with you about the certification in our follow-up to today's webinar. Also, keep an eye out for Run Toward the Roar, the book, due out this summer. And that brings us to our Ask the Experts part of the program today. So let's have Dr. Murphy and Dr. Turner back to the virtual podium and help us address some of the questions that have been queuing up during today's talk. I have one coming up right here, and the first one is, we move at a very fast pace. Does Run Toward the Roar? Emmett, Jim, which of you would like to take a swing at this one?
Well, I guess I'll jump in first. It sure does. We like to get an executive or management team up and running in 2 to 3 hours through a fast-paced 4-step leadership session. We like to get the major issues on the table and the keys to ownership right there in front of the executives so they can understand and experience it. Leaders today believe what they experience. And we've found that when leaders experience the Run Toward the Roar firsthand, even in a fast-paced version, they feel empowered and ready to take the next step towards courage, which is to find out whether their perceptions of the risk and the opportunities are the same as others they're working with up and down the line.
Okay, well, thank you. Next question, I think this might be a good one for you as well, Emmett. How much time is involved in the 6-part leader and trainer certification series?
Oh, well, we designed this after much thought. There are 6 sessions. The first part of an hour is content. It's fairly intensive on what you really need to know, followed by a half-hour conversation, questions and answers, and if folks want to hang on, of course, I'm there for that. What we're trying to do is we know we're dealing with people who have a lot of background, very intelligent, and really it's a matter of being able to utilize that background in a different context with a new and streamlined set of tools. So in 6 sessions we found for our first cycle of charter certified consultants, we found great success. So we're trying to do this in 6 basic sessions.
Okay, next question. Are the leadership traits of courage measurable?
I think that's one for me. This is Jim Turner. Absolutely. One of the things I went through myself is the ROAR Readiness Assessment for Leaders, which has been thoroughly tested for its reliability and validity. It helps a leader see the risk and challenges before him or her and how their talent and skills, match up. I've used it extensively with my clients in private practice, and it's been a great help to them to get focused on the serious personal growth issues in a very straightforward way, a non-judgmental way, but it says to survive, I have to face the truth.
All right. This one just in. Would you please respond to the new claim that healthcare is a business? It minimizes empathy for patients and staff in favor of hard-nosed business. Can empathetic organizations be profitable?
Well, I think both Jim and I would have opinions on that. I'll take a shot, Jim. You jump in.
I'll follow up.
Yes. The healthcare, the key, we just finished a little book called Take Control of Your Healthcare. And Jim was one of the authors, Shirley Rook, a wonderful and great nurse, Dr. Jim Pepicello, a trauma surgeon, all wonderful folks. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is better patient care equals a stronger bottom line. Misalignment and waste resulting from bad information, and that information results from not tuning into a patient, not getting the information accurately, and that results from a failure to empathize with the patient. The failure to empathize is a root cause of bad business. So if we're using the term business, we had better use the concepts of empathy, the concepts of choice, the concepts of dignity, because we're not going to provide quality care if you don't provide those. One of my earliest clients, and I was a very young guy, was Sam Walton, and I watched him apply in the early days those concepts of dignity and treating customers as if they were fellow members of the society. Boy, did that work. I think we'd better get on that same wave level as a Walton or others, and really get serious about the fact that patients aren't people we do things to, but people we listen to. That's key to business survival, and we have plenty of case studies for that.
And this is Jim Turner. I want to talk about from the front lines. I just went through a procedure at Kaiser. It was efficient. It was effective. It was well organized. Everybody did everything in the right, proper sequence. They kept me informed as a patient. You couldn't sell me insurance from anybody else but Kaiser Permanente today. So I believe that empathetic, well-organized, well-run patient care is not only cost-efficient, it is incredibly powerful survival tool that builds loyalty with your patients, that builds a cooperation with your physician, and makes it a humane organization while still being cost-effective.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. How about this one? We've got so many things going on. Would the ROAR process just complicate things?
No. It'll simplify things. That's why these leaders created this system. They had a mess going on. They knew it, and they needed to get hard-headed focus and a hard-headed handle on what was happening. So it simplifies. It was developed by leaders who understood the need to stabilize, simplify, and build resolve. If you're experiencing any kind of confusion, the ROAR process calms people down and gives them a center, a gravity, if you will, a center of gravity, and an involvement that puts things in order and gives them clear perspective.
All right. Well, I'm just taking a look at the clock, and it's just about time to wrap up. So what I'd like to do is ask you, Jim, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Yes. I'd like to take a couple of things and say, first, if you're a trainer out there, a coach, or a mentor, you can have a ready set of skills that are applicable across industries. Number two, you can have a process that works, run to the ROAR. And number three, you can have the tools you need to support that process. And you can actually do some good out there in these very fearful times. So Run to the ROAR is a great opportunity to make a difference in corporate life.
Very nice. Thank you. And how about you, Emmett? Anything you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Well, yes, I'd like to thank them for joining us today and sharing in this war readiness exercise. We are very fascinated and grateful to everyone who participated in the study. As everyone out there can imagine, how much work went into it and how much we learned. So we're very grateful for all of you who joined us to share in learning about how to run to the ROAR. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much. And folks, we're at that time and want to thank each of you for joining us today and hope that you found today's webinar of value and that you'll want to join us for future events. A special thanks to our speakers, Dr. Emmett Murphy and Dr. James Turner, and Murphy Leadership for making today possible. And again, as your moderator, Lori Dearman, saying thank you again and have a great rest of the week.